A book is primarily for yourself first, and then if it's interesting, you'll keep going with it. If you're not enjoying it, there's no point. So if you can write something that you're really enjoying writing, then people will enjoy reading it. And it's amazing how many people do read.
You're listening to Elevate, the official podcast of Elite Agent for real estate industry sales professionals, property managers and leaders. Each episode, we bring you the best minds in business and real estate to help you list more, sell more and elevate your results. To connect with all things Elite Agent, including the latest news, coaching and features, subscribe at our website, eliteagent.com.
Welcome to another episode of the Elevate podcast, where we delve into some of the most inspirational minds in business and in real estate for the very best tips and strategies for you to implement to elevate your business. I'm Samantha McLean, editor of Elite Agent and host of this week's show. They say everyone has at least one book inside of them, and if you think there might be one inside of you, then listen up. My guest this week has written 5 successful business books, with a 6th on the way. Geoff Grist has had 15 years in real estate, most of them with R&W in Mossman on Sydney's beautiful North Shore. He uses his love of writing to educate clients on the sales process, and while his latest book, Journey to Sold, is written for consumers, I can tell you it's a pretty good bunch of systems and processes that any agent can use. In this podcast, Geoff generously reveals how writing a book builds authority in your market with consumers, how to get writing, find a publisher, how to get past writer's block, and much more. Now, unless you're J.K. Rowling, you can't really expect to earn an income from writing a book, but Geoff does mention how he uses books in his prospecting to educate homeowners to make him the logical choice when listing, and secondly, as an education tool to make the selling process a whole lot smoother for both sides. I also asked Geoff for some of his best tips on managing sellers, managing buyers, asking for marketing dollars, what his favourite tools and advice have been throughout his career, and much more. There are tons of practical and actionable tips in this newsletter, so you should do one of two things. Either A, head to eliteagentelevate.com and download the links and the detailed show notes, and a next great step is always to let us do the hard work for you and let us send you all the notes and links from all of our podcast guests once a month in the form of our newsletter extra. You can jump on board the extra train by signing up to eliteagent.com/extra. That's it from me. Enjoy the chat with Geoff, and I hope this might inspire some of you out there to get writing. So welcome to the podcast, Geoff Grist.
Thanks, Samantha.
It's a pleasure to have you in the office. We're actually practically neighbours. You're just a little bit over Military Road in Mossman, and we're here in beautiful North Sydney. So first of all, how's the market been in your area?
It's slowed down over winter, which is usual because it's winter, but it's picked up again already. We're in spring and looking forward to a good run before Christmas.
Yeah, and you've been in the same place for quite a while. So tell us a bit of background about yourself. How long have you been in the business?
In real estate, I had 15 years, I think we're there now. Yeah, so I started at Richardson & Wrench and moved around a couple of times and came back home again.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy the Richardson & Wrench team and family.
Yeah.
And we just had our awards last week, and we were number 4 in Australia, so I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, that's very good, because Richardson & Wrench they're a smaller group, but have some very big performers.
Big hitters,
like Jason Boone and people like that. Yeah, absolutely. And you have a bit of an interesting background too. You were a sound engineer.
Correct.
For 60 minutes before real estate. So how did you actually make the transition from working in sound into...
Well, sound was, when I grew up, I didn't ever want to be behind a counter. So both my parents were pharmacists, so that was my destiny. So I thought, I've got to get outside. So location sound recording seemed like a great idea. I started Channel 10, then I set up a production company, and then I was asked to join 60 Minutes, which is probably the best job in the world.
Yep.
So after quite a while there, I decided to stay home and raise the kids, and set up an audio business in Artarmon, and ended up that won an award for being the best small business in New South Wales, the Telstra Award. Then I sold that business to Panavision, the movie camera people. So from there I had a little break, wrote my first book, and did a bit of a speaking circuit. And then Robert Simeon from Richardson Wrench was selling our house for us in Mossman. We were changing over. And he invited me to join the team. So a couple of years later I did.
Yeah, in you went. And we're here to talk about some of your books today, because you've just got another one out called Journey to Soul, but you've actually written 5 books, two I've read. So what got you into writing?
Well, a lot of people have different sports. I mean, I spent a lot of time kayaking for a while.
Yep, that's fun.
It is good
actually,
fun.
Good place to do it where you are too,
Yeah,
over in Balmoral.
So did a bit of kayaking, but I ended up, found that writing relaxed me quite well and really enjoyed it. And it's just you and your pen. It doesn't involve anyone else, and you have to deliver the goods to yourself. It's all about accountability to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing, and that's something that a lot of people struggle with. So let's just backtrack a little bit. So first of all, I met you a few years ago just after you've written Sold Above Market, which was about how consumers can get a premium price for their property.
Yep.
And now this latest one, Journey to Sold, this one's really interesting as well, because this one I feel like is a bit of a blueprint. Like if an agent were to pick up that book, the least they did was to follow everything that you said in that book, they'd have probably a pretty good year.
I think so. I mean, I've had a couple of people who've read it and said, gosh, you've given away all your trade secrets.
Yeah.
And I said, well, the point of writing the book, particularly from my own position, was to educate sellers so that they feel confident that the agent they're talking to has got a plan. And I'm very process-driven. I like to know what's going to happen. I'm not big on surprises. I like to be able to make a decision that's an informed one. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the book does it beautifully. How hard is it really? Because a lot of agents want to write books because we hear that to be a true influencer, you need a book behind you. And a lot of people will say that. People have even said that to me, Sam, you need to write a book. You need to write a book.
It's true. And look, even the viral video bloggy type people, they still actually fall back on writing a book.
Yeah.
A book is primarily for yourself first, and then if it's interesting, you'll keep going with it. If you're not enjoying it, there's no point. So if you can write something that you're really enjoying writing, then people will enjoy reading it. And it's amazing how many people do read.
I imagine that when you're doing an appraisal, when you're meeting someone for the first time or something like that, you would take those books with you. And I imagine that gives you authority with them straight away. Exactly.
So, I mean, it's literally my pre-listing kit.
Yeah.
Let me drop a book into you and you can have a bit of an advanced look at who I am.
Yeah, and it's substantial, so people read it and then think this guy knows what he's talking about. So
worst they can do is hire the guy that wrote the book, hey?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get down to, if I'm an agent and I want to write a book, what is the first step? Do I have to find a publisher first? Should I have a manuscript first? Like what sort of chicken and egg are we talking here?
Yeah, subject matter, content's the big issue, right? So we really got to find an angle that is going to make it not just another book.
Yeah.
So it's got to have something that people say, if I read this, I'm going to learn this. And that's why you're reading for entertainment or you're reading to learn. So in terms of these types of books, it's all about learning process. So I set out to educate people. And if I can do that in an easy-to-read manner, then I think I've accomplished what I set out to do. Publishers aren't interested in you until you've got a manuscript.
Yep.
And then a lot of publishers have their own genre of types of books. The big thing, these days is self-publishing. So it used to be that the publishing houses versus self-publishers. Now a lot of people self-publish a first book and then get picked up by a publishing house after that.
Right.
My first book, which was called 500 Award-Winning Small Business Secrets, was picked up immediately by Simon & Schuster and went on to sell 30 to 40,000 copies. So it was a big hit. They were always after me for another book. But at the time, I hadn't quite decided that's what I wanted to do. So I think these days with real estate agents, if you can find an area that you want to educate somebody about, how you do the job, what happens if, and I think that there's a great area there where things go wrong. That's something people don't take into account. They just expect, put a sign in the front of the yard, the house is going to sell itself. Yeah, not quite. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in between. And if you can explain all of those in a really easy to read way, there's probably a book in it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's pretend I've got a manuscript.
Mm-hmm.
How to avoid things that go wrong in real estate. Let's just call it
Great
that.
title.
Yeah.
It's all about the title.
I think that's a combination of book 1 and book 5 that we were just talking about there. How did you approach a publisher? Like, we know Leslie from Major Street does a few of the books in and around the industry, but what's someone like Leslie looking for?
So once I'd written the book, I then started researching who would publish this type of book.
Yep.
And Leslie's name just kept coming up and up. And she has a great stable of authors that specialise in business and property books. So that's her niche. And so if you take her something that's really specific, it's probably not going to work for her. But in a broader sense, she's got a good understanding of her market. And they're going to give you the feedback. So you can ring and try and have a chat first and then send a shortened version so that they get an understanding of, a synopsis, if you like, of what the book's about. And then if they want to read more, they'll ask you to send them through the manuscript. So off the back of that, they'll decide whether that's a sort of book that will suit them. And if it doesn't, they may know someone that it will. There's a lot of smaller publishers around now that just handle niche areas versus the big guys, yeah.
Yeah, so you've really got to have a clear, not only do you need to write a manuscript, but you actually need to write some sort of executive summary or something like that you can then pass on, and then they can say, yes, I like the idea, or no, go back and do something else.
Exactly, yeah. And so writing a book's got the beginning, the middle, and the end.
Yeah.
And usually the beginning and the end are pretty easy, but it's the middle muddle, as they say, that gets you unstuck. So you just have to write it. There's no such thing as writer's block. You can always write something. You might have to put a line through it later, but at least you've written something.
Yeah.
So that's the goal, to keep writing. And a book like this is in the sort of 30 to 35,000 words. For this type of book, they don't want any longer than that. So that's the good news. So when I wrote Journey to Sold, it was 60,000 words. And Leslie got a big red pen and went through it. So, sometimes you just keep writing.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't need all that,
Some people say that it's easier to just keep writing than it is to, stop and edit yourself and all the rest of it. And I know what I do. Like sometimes if I'm drawing a blank on what I need to write in terms of a story, I will sit there and write and not correct myself for like half an hour, and then I'll go back and have a look, or I'll sleep on it and have a look. What does your process look like?
Yeah, I agree. You just keep writing and get it off your chest, if you like.
Yeah.
And then you can always go back and edit it. But if you haven't got it in the first place, then you're looking at a blank page.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of the actual editing process, when we're putting together a magazine, some people send me great articles that I have to do very little to, and other people send me stuff that, like I kind of make faces at my computer.
Yeah.
Strange faces, thinking this is going to take hours to fix.
Yeah.
So let's just say I feel like I've got a book in me, but, I'm a bit concerned about my writing skills. Mm-hmm. Like, how does that come? Like you just said, Leslie sent you back a whole heap of red pen. What did you do?
Yeah, no, well, you take on board your criticisms and say, okay, her biggest issue was I had too much in the book.
Yeah.
Because if it's too fat, then it sort of moves into a different. We like 700-page novels, but business books have got to be easy to read.
Yeah.
So there was just too much content. So we pared it back, and I'm pretty good at that. Actually, done a course in copywriting, which is see how many words you can remove, so and still have the original meaning. So I think copywriting is a really good place for people to learn the art of writing shorter stories, because you're taking something longer and saying, how do I say that in fewer words and still get the same meaning across? Yeah.
That was one of Mark Twain's things, wasn't it? I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one instead.
Exactly.
It's definitely a skill to get it down to being succinct. Yeah. So before we get on to some of the stuff in the book, what advice would you give to other agents who are thinking about writing a book?
I think they absolutely should. It's good for you. It's good for your profile, and makes people feel, as you say, that you're an authority and that you're confident. There's a couple of people around that can help you do that. So there are writing courses. There's particularly a guy that I've worked with called Andrew Griffiths. He's written about 15 business books. He's sold over 1 million books, and he offers writing courses and online and both retreats. So Andrew Griffiths, as opposed to Andy Griffiths, who's a children's book writer.
Yep.
There's a couple of them.
There's a comedian too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So people can have a look at his work, and he's on Facebook and Instagram and things, and he's a very active, lovely guy, and I think he's helped so far, he said, over 600 people to get that book down and get it published.
Yeah. They say everyone's got at least one inside of them, don't they?
Exactly.
So that's interesting. So the step one would be, think about what you write. Step two, maybe do a writing course. Step three, then, once you've got the idea and a rough manuscript together, then go and look for a publisher.
Yeah, exactly. There's two types of writers. There's people who plan, so they script it all out and write the summaries and things as they go. And then there's what they call pantsers. So pantsers are people that write by the seat of their pants. They just write, So I prefer to have a bit of a structure so that I know when to stop. If I've got to cover these subjects, let's just cover them with enough words to fill a book, not have too many left over.
Yeah, I know which category I fall into. Let's move on. Okay, so like I said before, I had a read of your book, Journey to Sold, and I thought it was really interesting in terms of the way that it broke down the pre-sale process, the open for inspection process, then on to negotiation, then various things that could go wrong. And really, you kind of did lay out a blueprint of your business plan as to how you deal with every vendor, every buyer, every call, everything. So, if you happen to be listening to this podcast, definitely have a look at Geoff's book because it's well worth it. So let's go with some quick tips from the book for other agents. Best tip, preparing someone for a sale.
Start early.
Yeah.
The worst thing that can happen to me is people turn up and say, I'm ready to sell. And you say, okay, let's just run. I've got a 100-point checklist. Let me just run that past what you've got and see if you're set to sell. And generally, they're sort of around the 50% mark. I like to work with someone prior to get things in order. We use the little term, get your ducks in a row.
Yep.
And if we can get all the ducks in a row, we're taking a property to market that we're very comfortable will be well received.
Yeah. What are some of the real gotchas at the moment that vendors still get wrong that you look out for?
It's probably vendor paid marketing.
Yeah.
They really look at that as like, oh, do I need to do this? The house will sell itself. Well, it won't. The problem, as I say to them, is that if you don't start with a bang and have all the right marketing up front, you can't add it as you're going along when the feedback is that no one's interested in your home.
Yeah.
So you get one chance to make a first impression, and you've got to do it in marketing terms right up front. You can't drip feed it along and say, oh, well, maybe we should have gone with both domain and real estate, not just domain. Yeah. Maybe we should have put the video in there, but it's too late now.
That's that thing, you can't sell a secret, can you? So, you go, far and wide when you can.
Exactly, yeah.
How do you raise the topic of vendor paid marketing with a new seller?
Well, it's part of the process. So as I say to them, we've got a process to get us from A to B, and every house is going to be different, but the process is the same. So homes like yours, this is the marketing investment we've used in the past, and it's worked beautifully. So let's not change it. I was talking to a vendor the other morning, and she said, oh, can we take that out and take that out and take that out? I said, this is a bit of a recipe. If you take those things out, it's not going to taste as good.
Yeah.
She got that bit straight away. She said, okay, let's do it your way. I said, great. Then that's the type of client I'm looking for. So if they're educated, they understand why we're doing it rather than me have to explain it all again,
Actually, that's really smart. This is where the book comes in again, isn't it? You've already educated them through the process of what you're going to be looking for as you take them on their journey to sold. Journey to sold.
Yep. I've sold hundreds of homes just like yours. This is the way we do it. Let's do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you talk to people about the choice between auction as a method of sale, private treaty, or expression of interest? Because there would be a few EOIs in your area.
Yeah, there's a mixture of everything, and I'm open to that. So what I say to them is, what have you done before? What are you comfortable with? What are your end goals in terms of timing? And where are you headed and that sort of thing. So some people are saying, look, we just want it sold straight away. We already know where we're going. Others might say, well, I'm not sure where I'm going, so I'm not in a rush. But at the same time, they do want to have a time frame around it. So we generally start off with an auction campaign. I had one last week which was going to auction on Saturday. It was sold on the Thursday beforehand because we had found our best buyer.
Yep.
She was the best buyer. I didn't need to put her in an auction room with a buyer who had less money than she did. So we made a decision to go with her, and they're both very happy. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, speaking of that, there was a chapter in the book that you wrote about buyers and about qualifying buyers. And given that you've been in the game for like 15 years, how do you know when a buyer's serious and when they do have the money? How do you know that you've got that best buyer? First
question that I ask people now is, when was the last time you bid at an auction? Oh, I've never bid at an auction.
Okay.
Yep. There's a qualifying question right there.
Yep.
If the answer is, I missed out on one last Saturday, I'm going to grab them with both arms because they're absolutely A1 grade buyer that's ready to buy a property. The young lady that just purchased the property from me saw it on day one, but she didn't have a finance organised. So I was able to introduce her to a broker who was able to get her sorted over the 3 weeks leading up to the auction, and the finance came through on the Thursday. I was at her residence on Thursday night at 7:30 signing the contract because everything was in place before the auction. Yeah. Yeah. So actually, that's the key. So another part of the book too, I'm going back to the book again. There are some slippery slopes in the whole sales process. So where do you think sellers most slip up, and how can agents help them not do that? One of the problems that sellers have is when you get an early offer on a property. Let's say we're looking for $1 million for a property. You get an offer of $1,050,000. And the owner says, that's great, we'll take that, take that million. And then the buyer's not qualified and the buyer doesn't proceed. So then the next offer's back at $1 million, which is what we were looking for originally. And they say, yeah, but I'm $50,000 short. Well, no, that $50,000 extra offer was never really there in the first place. So they have a bit of a hard time letting go of a phantom offer, if you like. And I can relate. I understand that. But there's a point where that's the qualification of the buyer. If they're not really serious, it's very easy to make an offer on something, and it's a lot harder to follow through on it. Yeah, absolutely. And what about on the other side? What about buyers who miss out? Buyers who miss out are generally not organised. So they haven't got their finance in place. They've got a pre-approval that's more than 3 months old, and it's expired, if you like. We're finding at the moment that the banks, depending on the client, they want to see a signed contract at the price before they'll do the valuation to then give the final approval. So it's sort of a chicken and egg thing, but if that's the way we've got to do it, then we've got to work that way. The other thing buyers, I think, who miss out, they just don't make offers. They don't get into it. They wait and see. So a lot of people say, I'm just waiting to see what happens at this other auction before I get onto this one. And in the meantime, someone else comes up and says, I love this, I'll buy it. Yeah. And then they miss out. Yeah. Yeah. So if, the best advice is if you, as a buyer, you see a property you want to buy, try and buy it. Don't wait. Yeah. And if, I guess if you're an agent listening to this and you have some buyers that are hesitating, like that's some really good conversation to be having with them. Exactly. I've only got one like this, and once it's sold, I haven't got another one. It's gone. Don't come crying. Exactly. Okay, so just some questions here on your experience. Knowing what you know now, if you were to start in real estate now as opposed to 15 years ago, is there anything that you do more quickly or differently? Good question. Well, relationships are the biggest thing in real estate. People need to trust you before they're going to hand the keys to their house. So having a track record is important, but when you're starting out, you've got to sort of leverage other people's track records in the office. And the second part of that, hand in hand, is market knowledge. So if you don't know what's happening in your own market and can demonstrate that to a potential vendor, then you've got a problem because they won't be able to understand that you actually do know what you're talking about. So you've got to generate your own good luck by spending a lot of time in your own marketplace, go to other people's open homes, find out the reason why, so that when you're talking to a buyer who says, I'm also looking at this other property, you know that property and you can say, look, that property is great. This one offers these features and benefits that one can't match. That's why I'm asking a bit more.
Yeah, that's that super hyper local kind of knowledge.
Exactly. That's what they want. I mean, first thing I do when people come into an open home, I've got one in Neutral Bay at the moment, I say, are you familiar with Neutral Bay? Do you know that we're only a 5-minute walk to the ferry? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, great. Well, let's get location sorted and then I can help them go from there.
Yeah, this one's 5 minutes from the ferry. This one's 5 minutes from the M20 bus stop.
Exactly.
That one's going. I know which one's going to be a lot better.
Give me the ferry.
Yeah, give me the ferry any day. What are your favourite tools for running sales, like whether they be technology or otherwise? What are your favourite tech tools at the moment?
I'm big on communication. What I usually do when I'm setting up an open home is get all my signboards and my flag out and take a photo. So if it's an 11 o'clock open, 10 to 11, I'm taking a photo of my setup and I'm sending it to the vendor to say I'm here.
Yeah,
I'm here, I'm set up, I'm ready to go, ready to meet people.
Yeah.
At the end of the open home, and maybe I've had 5 or 6 people through, I use an app called Bonjoro, and I can do a quick video in the car.
I've heard of that one.
To say, hey, we had 6 people through. One of them's actually pretty interested. Obviously, I'm following them all up. But just wanted to keep you up to date, and I'll give you a call back later on. And that's a little video clip, which, again, shows you're a real person and that you were there.
Yeah.
And they get that. They can watch it without downloading anything and makes them feel very comfortable that you're doing a great job.
Yeah, vendors would love that.
Yeah, it's quick and easy. I had a vendor that lived out at West Pennant Hills and selling her property in Neutral Bay. So the only time I met her was when I signed the agreement, and she was a young mum with lots of things going on. But she used to get these video updates from me, and when I sold her property for her, the number one thing she said I did for her was kept her informed at all times with little videos.
Yeah.
And I didn't realise that was the key to that made her feel connected to the sale.
Yeah, I know when someone sends me video, and video has been a really big thing that we've talked about a lot on the podcast lately, even with responding to emails using Loom or something like that. But if someone sends me a video on my mobile phone, I will always open it no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing.
Yep.
Yeah, really good tip there. Most valuable piece of advice that someone ever gave you in your career?
Don't sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
If you've only had one person through the open home, something's got to change. You can't say, oh, well, I hope we get more next week. It won't happen on its own. So tell them what's going on, and then you can negotiate to make things better, Yeah.
Absolutely. And the future of real estate, where do you see us all in about 5 years' time?
That's a good question, Samantha. There's a lot of interesting things happening in the US at the moment. There's new brands and things starting. There's virtual offices. There's that type of thing. Real estate agents are safe. We are the in-between the buyer and the seller. Interestingly, early in my days, if the buyer doesn't like the seller, we're the one that's caused that because we're the one in between. They've never met. Right? They're not going to meet.
Yep.
But if our dialogue is such that they go, geez, they're a bit difficult to deal with and blah, 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 then we haven't done a good job communicating and keeping them together. So that negotiation side can't be replaced. Yes, you can, buy things online and stuff, but to this very day, I've never sold a property to someone who hasn't come along and walked through it, asked me questions, and then begun a conversation that became a negotiation. So we're safe in that no one else can do that part for us. Whether we're going to do it by video or some other form, I don't know. But I know real estate agents are safe, yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. Like I do think, that whole buying and selling process, you're always going to want to make time to go and see it.
It's emotional. I had a lady email me the other day saying, we're driving down from Cowra just to see this property. So, that's a big commitment, and I'm thinking she's a great buyer to be working with.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, are there any more books on the horizon?
Funny you should say. Yes. I've got another book. So the next book's called Flip for Cash, and it's about taking the sort of 60s and 70s units that were never all built fairly cookie cutter, and converting them into luxury apartments, because apartments sell for more than units. So really we're talking about flipping apartments.
Yeah.
And I've actually just worked with a gentleman. I sold him a property in February. He was a deceased estate and was absolutely original. He's come through, he's renovated it to a very high standard, and I've just sold it for him, and he's made a considerable upside. So that's the type of thing I'm talking about. There seems to be a bit of backlash at the moment on new apartments. So people are saying, I don't want a new one. I want a solid old one that doesn't have any problems.
Yeah.
The problem with the old ones is that they're pretty standard. So, we want people to feel a bit of luxury when they buy a place, and people to walk in and see the value that a good renovation has done.
Yeah.
So that's, that should be out about February, I think.
Yeah, that sounds like for fans of the block.
Exactly,
But without the nuisance of all those TV cameras.
Well, houses are getting very expensive to flip, but there's still one-bedroom apartments around where you can still make good money.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. We're going to have a lot of links in these show notes. Geoff Grist, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks, Samantha.
To connect with all things Elite Agent, including the latest news, coaching and features, subscribe at our website, eliteagent.com.